actually think that it's so expensive to get divorced and to go through the process of getting divorced that like couples just grin and bear it and just like they weather it and they just go, well, I don't have another option right now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another very fun and interesting episode that we have today of Ask a Sex Therapist. I am joined by two guests today. So Alex Hanno is a Los Angeles-based writer/director whose credits include the upcoming apocalyptic thriller A Social Contract, starring Sean Astin, and the horror satire Detox, which has screened at the likes of Seattle International Film Festival, Newport Beach Film Festival, and Tallgrass Film Festival. Caitlin Morris is an actor/producer from St. Petersburg, Florida. Woohoo! She has worked extensively in the off-Broadway theater scene, starring in the long-running hit Drunk Shakespeare, and has collaborated with companies such as The Public, Playwrights Horizons, The Bushwick Star, New Georges, and Ars Nova. She has also created, produced, and acted in an array of indie film projects and is a lifetime member of the Actors Studio. So welcome, Alex and Caitlin. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for having us, Heather.
Jinx.
Wow, are we married or what?
No, just get used to it. Oh,
you must
disgusting.
be married. Which, we're going to talk about marriage today, and you guys are married. And I'll just mention to people how I basically accosted you at the local film festival here in St. Petersburg. That's what you remembered as well. Oh, yeah. It's like guerrilla podcast recruiting. But yeah, so I had been there with a friend, just like, it's the Sunscreen Film Festival. We had signed up to watch a group of shorts, and yours was one of them, and it's called Every Seven. So we'll link to it for people listening if you want to go watch the film, which you totally should. But tell us a little bit about this project. Like, how did it even develop? Like, how did you guys come up with this?
So this was, I would say, kind of the not even height of COVID necessarily, but that moment during the COVID era where we were all just tired of it. We were over it. I think it was like early 2022. And Caitlin and myself, we were itching to get back into production because it had just been paused for so long. And so we said, let's go make another short film. We've collaborated on a number of things, and we're very fortunate that as artists, we are able to collaborate in addition to being partners.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so we, another collaborator of ours, friend of ours named Michael Stagliano, was kind of at a similar spot and was itching to make something. And so three of us said, let's throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And we had a meeting or two. We kind of watched some other shorts that, to some degree, like served as a launching point for us and inspiration. Excuse me. And very quickly, I feel like we hit on a shared theme that all of us were interested in. And that ended up being marriage and relationships. And I think at the time, Caitlin and I, we would have been pretty newly married. I think it would only really have been a year. Michael would have been hitting that 7-year mark, that 7-year itch, as it were. And there were, instances in his family life that I think served as inspiration as well, as there are in pretty much anybody who's reached 30 something, you're starting to see divorce, right? You're starting to see your friends get divorced.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting coming at this because Caitlin and I, obviously, now we're 3.5 years married and very happy. And Michael has been, now he's, 8, I think he's at 10 actually. Very happy. And yet we have so many friends that are in situations where they're not, or where they're now in their second marriage.
Yeah.
And so I think we were really curious to dig into that and to look at, from a narrative perspective, why that is, and more specifically, like peeling it back further. I grew up a Catholic, so there's, plenty that we could talk about there. But looking at
same.
But why the institution of marriage is the way that it is, or structured the way that it is, right? And the fact that it pretty much hasn't changed at all since it started. And so we can dig in a little bit more to that, but that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And then once we landed on this, okay, we want to tell a story about marriage and not even really like critique it necessarily, but just ask some questions. That's where we kind of rocked the races with it.
And that's what I loved about the film, is just this idea of questioning. And that's such a big theme of this podcast, is like, we're handed so many, like what I call social scripts of like, this is what you're supposed to do, you know, and they talk about like the relationship escalator. It's like, you meet and you date and you get engaged and you get married and you move in together. And then you like have kids and you should have a white picket fence in the burbs with a dog, you know, it's like, there's this like prescribed, you know, idea of what you're supposed to do. And I really think that that might work great for a lot of people, but I think the questioning is so important. And part of what excites me is that, you know, people are starting to question it. People are starting to do marriage differently. Part of what I've loved about your film too is like, it's a thought that I have had as well, about like, what if marriage was like not forever? So how did you guys come up with that idea to explore sort of like a time limited marriage?
Yeah. I mean, I think to Alex's point, this notion of a 7-year itch is like in the collective conscious, like we're aware of what that is or what that means.
It is. Yeah.
And we were kind of like, well, what would it mean if you know, if the world looked at that 7-year mark as an opportunity rather than like a roadblock, and went, okay, if this is generally the time in a relationship where couples kind of start questioning or having some serious trouble, what if that's also the opportunity for you to reassess in real time, like, is this something that I want to re-enlist for another 7 years on, or something that I want to walk away from?
And I think a lot of that, there's just, the stakes are so high, right? Like anytime if you're married, or you're in a long-term relationship and you're having a conversation about that relationship, I mean, you've built a life together. The stakes are monumental. And when you know, if you were to decide to end that, there's so much red tape that you're cutting through. And so I don't think, and just to back up, the premise of the film is that it's set in an alternate universe where every 7 years couples basically go to a government mandated office to decide to either re-up their marriage for another 7 years or just dissolve it. And it's clean and it's easy and it's normalized. And we're not suggesting necessarily that that's the best format for marriage, but I think
it's an interesting one though, for sure.
But you know, just asking that question of, is there a better way, right? Is there a better way to do this? And like you said, standard marriage may work well for a lot of people. Then again, more than 50% of marriages end in divorce. So maybe not, you know?
Well, and I love what you said too, Heather, just about like the notion of these social scripts that we just kind of follow or fall into. You know, so much of that is just ingrained in us from such an early age. And, you know, I think like let's get personal. Why not? I was certainly one of those people who like really questioned whether the institution of marriage was even something I was interested in. You know, I was really kind of, a little disillusioned by the whole thing, which is strange because my parents have been married for like 48 years or something. And, you know, very happily, you know, I have this great example of marriage. So it's not a reflection on that. It's more of a question of like, why don't we question? Like, let's just take a minute and go, is that actually the thing that I want, or the thing that's best for us? And, you know, if so, great, let's do it. If not, like, maybe let's consider a different version. But Alex won me over, so.
Yeah, well, you know, you do what you can.
Good job, Alex.
Well done.
2.5 years long distance will do that. You know, you just put the work in.
Oh, wow, that's tough, too. Yeah.
That kind of strengthened things.
Yeah, I mean, what were you saying, Caitlin?
Just that it kind of strengthened things for us. You know, I think that the challenge of distance, like, in some ways, like really kind of unlocked, I mean, first of all, really forced us to communicate like extremely effectively, because that's all we had.
Okay. That's true.
Yeah. And so it was kind of like we built this incredibly strong foundation as a result of the distance. I don't think in spite of, I think really in some ways because of that. Yeah,
100%.
I've heard that before, and I think it definitely can go either way.
Yes,
that's awesome that for you guys it wound up being something that created a strength for you. Can you tell us, just since we're getting into it a little bit, like, so how did you guys meet?
I mean, Heather, you're going to love this.
We met almost the exact same way you and I met, Heather. We met at a film festival in the the very romantic Manchester, Vermont, not to be confused with Manchester, Hampshire.
It was fall in Vermont. So need I say more? I mean, it
did all the heavy lifting.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we both had projects there, and I saw Caitlin on screen in the project that she had. It was a web series called Sublets. I saw her on screen before I met her in real life, and there's a debate about when we actually met in real life. But when we did meet, it was one of those moments where it was like, I know you because I just saw you. And similarly, Caitlin got to see my project as well, and so there was this sort of baseline of, okay, this person's talented. We know that they have, can create quality entertainment to sort of reach a certain caliber. And I think for me at least, a lot of the, the walls that are up, usually when you're meeting new people that you may be interested in, those just dissolve because immediately we're able to talk about film and talk about each other's projects.
Yeah.
So that was how we initially met. But I was on the West Coast at the time, and she was in New York. So.
Oh, so then how do you keep in touch after that first little meeting? Because that's not like a ton to go on initially.
It's really not. I mean, I think it's a great example too of it's such a hackneyed adage at this point. The whole when you know you know thing, but it really was like that feeling of just like we need to continue talking, and so we just started talking on the phone a lot.
And mind you, the festival was like 4 days long, so we were basically ended up hanging out for the entirety of that festival.
Got it.
It was a very small town, so there's one bar that everyone is gathering at. So it was sort of a shared community there. But it was. I think we left that festival not really having plans to continue talking, but very quickly after we were.
Yeah. A lot of phone calls.
A lot of I don't think Zoom was really.
We FaceTimed a lot.
Yeah, we've been FaceTiming. Yeah.
Okay.
Gosh, but I can't even think of anything
like
pre-Zoom.
Just kind of. Yeah. Skype used to be Skype.
Right. Wow.
Or Skype. Yeah.
Those were the days.
But I love that for you guys. And then I also kind of wanted to go backwards into the history of marriage. Like you kind of mentioned, the institution hasn't changed that much. So I'm assuming you did some research or whatever for the film. So what did you find about how it started? And
I mean, I think for me, there's a lot of as a feminist, a lot of questions about the ownership structure of marriage, or why, the origins of marriage are very much rooted in I want to add your lands to my lands, and your family is of this
a business deal.
Yeah, this social strata that I would like to achieve, or there's some kind of it felt like it was a currency. It wasn't. For so long, it was not about love. It was not about I found my person. It was you have 12 goats and I want them.
I got all of her goats.
Which is just so strange, It's strange that we've turned it into this very fairy tale, love centric, romantic endeavor. Because it is in so many ways. And even since we've been married, I think we have had several conversations where I'm what they don't tell you about marriage, and should, is that even now it is absolutely as much a question of who do you want to go into business with as it is who do you want to go on dates with, it's it's both things.
And snuggle and smooch.
Yeah, it is snuggling, and it's also a business contract, it's you're combining your bank accounts.
Yes, could not agree more. And I'll share a little bit about my background. Some of the listeners probably know some of it, but so my parents are divorced. I do not think, I was how, as a kid, I was even how did these two get together? I don't get it. And I actually think that's part of what's made me a good therapist working with couples, is because, as a kid, I was like able to see the patterns with my parents. And I was like, if dad could just do this and mom could just do this, that would be their path forward. So it's like this weird gift that I developed as a child. I remember thinking that it really is two separate things. And I feel like we've kind of conflated them in our society. And so I was always interested in, the love part and maybe sort of the spiritual connection or ceremony type thing. But the legal part is such a different animal. It's like, marriage is a legal institution. And so I just find it so fascinating when people romanticize it and kind of merge the two. Now, of course, the two can coexist, right? Like you can have the love and the legal contract, like you're saying. It's kind of been both for you guys. But it's like
it's strange.
The whole wedding industry, I think, is really fascinating.
Oh, yes. And it is strange that people don't fully, I don't think they think of it as the two branches when they're going into it. I think so often it really is like they're like swept up in the fairy tale of it. And I mean, it's shocking to me how many couples I've heard of like don't talk about like their finances or they're
or don't have. Again, we're not trying to judge. Everyone's going to kind of have a different situation, but like the idea that you don't have a shared bank account, like to me is it's interesting. It's like, okay, you assumedly you're partnering, right? We use the term partner often nowadays, right? And to us, that's what it is. It is a partnership, right? So that means when I'm low or I'm, having a tough time, okay, Caitlin's stepping up and helping to carry the load and vice versa. And I think, just looking at some of the relationships around us, that's not really seen. And even that, it's like the bank account to me is some indication of that, of like, okay, we're joining forces on this so that we can really thrive. It is.
Which, of course, then the counterpoint to that argument is, historically, women have been trapped in marriages that they don't want to be in because they are tied financially to the person who is like, the bank account is shared. They have none of their own money. They can't get out of a bad. So, two sides to that.
Well, and I mean, they're, and I haven't done like a ton of research on this, but I know that, way back in the day, the woman was the property of the man. So that's concerning. There were also like laws where a man could hit his wife and that was fine. A man could rape his wife and that was fine. So there's, there's a lot of history there. Well, and even now. Okay.
No, I was going to say there's still so much of that out in the world. And I mean, right now, I think we're in a terrifying time where we're seeing people be more vocal about all of that. Not to get political, but you don't have to look very far. Harrison Butker out there, Kansas City, my God, love his leg, but I don't love his mind. But it's just a scary time that in some ways we're stepping backwards, and I think a lot of this is rooted in religion, and I think and I think it's this push and pull of like us trying to put some a small short out into the world to say like, let's open a conversation, a dialogue here, when simultaneously you have folks going out there and saying the exact opposite and saying, actually, no, you should just stay in the household, and that is what should make you happy. And fulfilled. Right. And I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, it's a hilarious idea.
It is.
Just come to any city in the world, come to any, developed town or city. And it's like, open your eyes, have a conversation. And that's clearly not, that's not how people want to live nowadays. But we're just seeing that pushback, which is part of why I think, a movie like this, again, I'm not saying this is the most important thing in the world necessarily, but part of why I think we wanted to contribute.
Pretty good, though, I have to say. But you did a great job.
Just contribute to that conversation, because I think that's what it is. It is a conversation, and Caitlin mentioned communication for us, and like that's what it's about. That's what this movie, I think, to me, is fundamentally about. It's about people having the conversations, the tough conversations, before they blow up into something that destroys potentially what could be a happy marriage, which was actually an interesting thing. Before we got married, Michael, as mentioned, he's the co-star in Every Seven, and he was a co-producer and co-writer. He mentioned to us, I don't know if you remember this, but he mentioned to us, he said, it's important, because this is right before we got married, he said, it's important to differentiate between roommate issues and marriage issues and relationship issues.
Oh, okay.
And we kind of listened to that and said, okay, that's interesting. And he said, most of our arguments are actually roommate issues, right? If you think about and we've experienced some, how one washes the dishes, potentially. That might be,
right.
something.
Right.
Where one leaves one's expired glasses of water, for example.
I wonder who does that.
And so it was an interesting perspective, and honestly, I was really thankful for it, because then we were able to go into our marriage being able to sort of compartmentalize and say, oh, cool, this is not about our relationship. This is about us cohabitating in a certain space together. And I think the movie, it touches on that a little bit. It's part of the issues of the central couple in the movie are roommate issues. And part of those would be resolved if they just had a conversation about it. And so that's why we end up doing a performance review every year, where we literally sit down and have categories we go through and discuss and say, okay, how did you do this year on this category? We sort of review each other in a very open forum.
It's been amazing.
I love that. And I've thought about doing, because you know how you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, right? And we don't really have that for mental health, and we don't really have that for relationships. And I've never actually done it, but I've had that thought as well. I should start offering this as a service.
Yes, 100%. Because I do think that couples are every time we talk to people about it, they're like, that's amazing. But I do think that people feel a little stymied about how to facilitate it for themselves, you know? So if they had someone like you to come to, where you're really mediating the experience, I think that'd be awesome.
Right.
And how often are people having arguments, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years into their relationship, where they're blowing up about something, but what they actually want to say is not that thing. What they're actually upset about is not that thing.
Oh my gosh. That's my whole job.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure you're digging through so much.
It's to decode what people Yeah, that's right. I decode what people actually mean for their partner and then help the partner understand what's actually happening. But it's because the way it's verbalized is not always clear, and, can lead to defensiveness, and then they're escalating about, whatever's being said, but really there's this underlying thing. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Gottman Relationship Institute, but they do, they're kind of the foremost relationship researchers in the US, and they train a lot of couples counselors. So I've done the level 1 and 2 training with them. And, they're kind of you got to go with the deeper meaning. So what I'm always telling people is what's underneath, what's the more vulnerable layer underneath usually that can be scarier. It's interesting. It's scarier for us to be less armed and less defensive and softer. But I think that's where the actual intimacy happens, and I also, sex therapist, it's that emotional intimacy is necessary.
And I also think it's I should preface, it's not just when we sit down for our annual performance review, it's not just us attacking each other and saying, these are all the things you did wrong. It is a lot of self-reflection.
That wouldn't work, yeah.
And I think that's part of it too. So it's it's a trained skill set. And certainly when we started our relationship, and it was long distance, I think there was a lot more work that I had to put in on my end in terms of my self-work. Because this was in many ways my first kind of, I guess, adult relationship. This was a serious thing. And if you're going to be, dating somebody who lives 3,000 miles away, that's a pretty serious thing.
Oh my gosh.
And I wasn't prepared for it. So thankfully Caitlin was patient and forgiving and also a good communicator. And so I do think that is a trained and developed skill set, and it's hard to just dive into something like that. And like you said, not be defensive and to be willing to take ownership and say, I do need to do better. And part of our performance review is taking an opportunity to review ourselves too, and to say, to go in and say, I think I have been slacking this year on XYZ.
Okay.
But again, it's like that's a lot of like emotional awareness at times, and we're certainly not perfect. But it is.
What? So I would love to hear from both of you. Like, how did you get to that point? Because I can imagine a lot of people listening being like, okay, this sounds great in theory, but also like horrifying, like so scary to like face that or like get that feedback like so directly and kind of or like get a score in a certain category or something. And I'm thinking you have to probably overcome some ego. You have to be able to take like radical responsibility. Like, how did you guys get to that point?
I'm trying to think like where the initial idea came from.
It was my idea.
I'm sure it was her idea. I mean, this may be a cop out. I know. So my parents are both teachers. Caitlin's mom is a teacher.
Okay.
So there's probably something.
My mom's a teacher too.
There you go. You get it.
Yeah. But there's probably something in our brains that says, okay, how can we?
I mean, specifically, I think it was. I also have a corporate day job, and we have annual performance reviews as part of that. And I think I was really struck by the fact that when you're forced to just sit down and the whole goal of the meeting is talking about how the last year went, suddenly, whether or not you have a ton to say, like your feet are kind of held to the fire a little bit in a way that like, it's very easy to just kind of like gloss over stuff or not acknowledge these minor hiccups or not praise or celebrate these great victories, just in service of like continuing, like pushing forward, doing the job. So I think marriage is similar in the sense that you're like showing up every day, doing the marriage. And sometimes you just need a moment to literally be like, let's just sit with each other for these couple hours. And the goal is looking at the last year and seeing how we did, you know?
And I also think that, I don't know if we really had too much experience in this hands-on, but some of the small things, some of the roommate issues that Michael was talking about, there's not really a great time or a safe space to bring that up, right? Because, for example, I'll give you a life experience here. When we first moved in together, we got some new knives. A set of, they're not really a set, but we have some new knives, right? And they're nice knives. Now, I did not have nice knives growing up. Okay, I don't know that tells you anything about my backstory, but maybe it does. And so what I would do is we don't have a dishwasher, so I would wash the knife and then I would set it on the drying rack.
Yeah.
And Caitlin, I very quickly educated me and said, if you do this, they're going to have water spots. How dare you?
Well, more specifically, it's not good for the knife. The knife does not stay.
You must dry. You must dry the knife immediately after you've washed the knife.
And I did not know this. Okay.
Right.
Well, when we move in together, Heather, I'll tell you all
about knives.
And right, like this,
thank you. That would be great.
You could listen to this, and certainly in the moment, I think we ultimately laughed more than anything else. But I guarantee you, there are couples out there where that would spiral into like an argument, or that would be something where the one partner would hear that and be like, "Wow, you're really nitpicking me right now." Now, again, we laughed about it. We still laugh about it to this day. But like, there's not a great opportunity to do that, because if Caitlin had come over right as I was setting it down or walking away from the wet knife, for example, and then said that, I could have felt like it was an attack. Right. So to be able to kind of, and that wouldn't have been how she would have been approaching it. She would have just probably been approaching him, saying, I want to let him know, I want to educate him so that we maintain our quality of knives. But if that's something that she has,
insane.
This is a micro
marriage secrets
scenario
from Alex and Caitlin.
Right, exactly. But if she had reserved that and then been able to bring it up at the performance review, where it's a safe space and where you've had time to sit with this thing to be able to say, okay, what's the right way to present this, right? Knowing that it's a silly thing, but like, let's talk about it. That is, I think that's part of where it came from as well, as being able to say, okay, we don't want little things to be blown up into big things, so let's reserve an appropriate space for them.
Yeah, I love that. And
now it's immortalized.
It is so funny, like hearing from now it'll exist forever on the podcast. But you guys are saying some things that are part of like the Gottman training, basically. So like one of the things you just said is kind of like the Gottman principle of a softened startup. And it's like how you start a conversation has like a 90% accuracy in terms of like how the rest of the conversation goes. And so like the knife thing is a great example where it could be like this little thing and someone feels attacked and then they're like, you're always picking on me, or you're always nagging, or you're always critical. And then it turns into this whole thing, right? But if someone, you kind of just got at it too, if someone's just like, hey, I know you're really into these knives, and just so you know, like, I want you to know this so that the knives like stay nice or whatever. So it's like when you state your positive intention, or when you kind of say, here's where I'm coming from, that really helps and can like eliminate some of the defensiveness and escalating. So I love that you guys just gave a real world example of that. That's awesome.
There it is.
Yeah, this is a podcast all about sex, right? We're getting as intimate as we can get.
Well, I mean, but I do really appreciate also that you're talking about, it's like you're having multiple relationships in one. It's like you're having the roommate relationship, you're having sometimes a co-parent relationship. I see a lot of couples where this is some of the stuff we talk about, surprisingly, because people have become expert roommates and co-parents, but have lost sort of the romance and the sexual spark because they've gotten so bogged down in that. And so kind of like I was saying with your, performance review, like you need to have some emotional intelligence and good ego strength in a way, and not get too defensive to do it. So like that is a lot of the work I do with people, is like creating that foundation so that you can have the vulnerable discussions, and so you can feel close, and so you can, rest and be lighthearted. And then that's what facilitates the sex for most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't care. They could be in the middle of a fight and have great sex. Those are not the people who call me.
Right. They're like, it's going fine.
Right. Exactly. They're kind of like, we fight, but we have really good sex, so it's fine. But sometimes those people will contact me just for the communication help.
Sure.
They're like, we don't need it in the area of sex, but we still want to work on our intimacy in other ways. But yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the film too. It was so unique because there's only 3 people in it, right? On screen.
Correct. Yeah.
And it was you, Kate, and Alex. You weren't the guy, were you?
No, he directed.
No, yeah, I directed it.
Yeah, okay. So Alex was off camera. So it was you, Caitlin, and it was your fake husband.
It was fake husband,
and then
Michael, who
it was the fake government guy.
Much better head of hair.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was like, and it was in one room the whole time. Which was so interesting, but there was like such an arc.
Yeah, I mean, that was also very much like the goal when we sat down and we're like, okay, we want to collaborate, we want to make something. Like we were all feeling like a little stir crazy and wanted to do a creative project. That was also like part of the goal, and the mission was just like, okay, we want to make a short film, and we've made so many in the past, and they always are like so unwieldy. Like there's just so many elements, like even if it's a 10-minute film, like there's just like always so much that goes into it. And so we really were like, okay, yeah, we were like, the goal is one room, us as actors, and maybe one other person, like one moment in time, like one slice of a story. And I
love that.
And it was like a fun challenge to be like, these are the guardrails. Like this is the sandbox. How do we play within it? And it really kind of helped shape and inform, because a lot of the notes we got actually about the script at the beginning was like people being excited about the universe that we had created and wanting to build it out, be like, it would be so fun to see the couple at this or do that. And we were like, totally, that's the feature film version, or like that's the series version. This is the short film. So it can only be one scene, one room, 3 actors,
Okay.
Which is like a fun challenge.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we could have
I love it.
We could have another 3-hour podcast talking about indie filmmaking in and of itself. But as an independent,
I am a little curious.
Yeah, well, as independent filmmakers, it's a lot of.
Could this get picked up, like, and become a feature film? Is that a thing that happens?
Absolutely could. So right now we just released. So the film just released last week on. It's a YouTube channel called Crafty. So folks can go over there and check it out. But in terms of kind of a future for it, I think that there's always 2 worlds when you're making a short. if you are envisioning that short continuing on, and not all short films have that trajectory. Sometimes it's like, oh, that is a perfect short, and that's the right format for it. But for this world, I think there's absolutely two versions that we've at least tossed out. One being we're following one couple in a feature film, and we are exploring their relationship at home, and then potentially what it looks like when they enter this world of this marriage auditor, and then what the aftermath of that is. Excuse me. But I also think we've talked about, and what interests us is the idea of more of an anthology series where you're following different couples in each episode and exploring what those couples are going through, right? And how within this reality, this world, they're able to navigate their relationship, either difficulties or lack thereof. And so I think there's 1,000 variations of that in between, I think.
But it's also, I think, worth saying that like making shorts, the challenge in indie filmmaking and in producing shorts is that there's really not like a great, like, unless you're building upon that, unless it's a proof of concept for something bigger, there's not really a great way for those to like live on or be seen like outside of the festival circuit. So an aggregator like Crafty, this channel that we're streaming every 7 on, is like an example of like sometimes there's a platform that like wants to host your film, but like the audience, the viewership for shorts is just like outside of festivals is just like not super strong.
Which is wild nowadays because our attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. And so
you'd think short films would be the perfect thing, but
it's so true.
Yeah. I'm like, you guys don't have the patience for a 90-minute feature? Like, watch a 10-minute short.
I know. Yeah. It was kind of surprising. And I mean, this was my first time ever going to a film festival. And my whole thought going was like, oh, I feel so sophisticated. This is like an artsy thing.
Did you enjoy your experience? Did you have fun?
I do. I thought it was great. I mean, I really liked yours. I really liked a couple of the other ones. I think there was like 6 or 7 films in the grouping. There's maybe one that I was like so on, but like generally I was like, we picked a good bunch.
Well, and we've gone to a lot of film festivals, and we always talk about that. We like going to the shorts blocks because it's a grab bag for sure. And you're not going to like all of them. That's just the math doesn't math.
Right.
But if you are going to a film festival and you walk into a feature film and, 15 minutes in, you're like, I don't love this. Sure, you can leave, or you're stuck there for 90 minutes of a film you don't like. Whereas with a shorts block,
exactly.
If you don't like it, it'll be over in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
It's like the weather in that place where the weather changes all the time.
That's right.
I don't remember what city it is, but it's
waiting for government.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So, I mean, having created this, having done some background research, even like seeing people's reactions to it. And I realize we are not the government. We are not deciding this on the podcast today. But like, what are your thoughts about the institution of marriage? Like, what do you think could be revisited or should be revisited?
It's a good question.
I think about, we were having a conversation with a couple friends, and we were talking about divorce. And I think it was in light of this short we were talking to them. And I was suggesting that like the reason that like couples stay together longer than they necessarily want to or should is because they're not like communicating and not like addressing that there's like a problem. And our friend was like, I actually think that it's money. He was like, I actually think that it's so expensive to get divorced and to go through the process of getting divorced that like couples just grin and bear it and just like they weather it and they just go, well, I don't have another option right now. So the part of it was that it was like
some people,
stripping away all, like you said, all the red tape, all of the complication, all of the like financial burden of like dissolving a partnership and just being like, if it was an option, then at least you could make the choice based on your feelings about the relationship as opposed to these like extraneous, it's not about the finances.
And I also think it's listen, is there a version of the Every Seven world we created where you have to take a test that you're answering questions about your partner to make sure that you're actually a good fit? Like, that's the opposite of, I think, what this film speaks to. And to me, it actually is less about how can we affect the institution, and more about, like, just as a couple, how can we be sure that this is right for us? And I think a lot of people get married. I mean, how many friends do we all have that got married in their early 20s because, like, that was what you did, you're supposed to do. And then they get divorced by, 30. And it's like, oh yeah, because I wasn't a fully thinking human being yet with my opinions. And I didn't
or they come to me about opening their marriage.
Right. And so I think
I get a lot of people who got married early who do that. Yeah.
Sure. Like, well, because that's probably one of their first, if not their first sexual partner. Right. So then there's a lot of like, what have I not experienced? Like, there's so much else out there, And
I think, figuring out like what version of it works for you, and if there were variations sort of legally, that would be more interesting too. But that to me is really what it's about. Less about like any sort of government interference, because Lord knows we don't want any more of that. But I feel like figuring out what the variations are, and also like normalizing it. Right? I'm sure for a lot of people, I'm projecting, but I'm sure when they come to you and say we're talking about opening up our marriage, there's a stigma there associated with that. And a pressure from sort of society to be a certain way. And I'm sure it also depends on the circles that people travel, but to be able to normalize situations that are, at the moment not perceived as such, I think that would be, that's a route I could see. Yeah. I don't have the solution.
I think about... I don't know that we're going to come up with a solution today, but some brainstorming is interesting. I think that the idea, even like the long distance thing, I've heard of a married couple living in two different countries, and like nothing was wrong with the relationship, but I think one was in Mexico, one was in the US, and people who sleep in different bedrooms, which sometimes is because the marriage is not going well, sometimes is not. I'm a big fan of Eckhart Tolle, and he's like a spiritual teacher, and he and his wife have separate houses that are like in the same neighborhood or next to each other or something like that, and so he's even talked about like as people are kind of like on this path of, spiritual awakening, that sometimes just like more space can be helpful. And so I think that's interesting too, just this idea of like space and like keeping your independent identity, but then also having intimacy and closeness, and kind of deciding on like what degree of independence, what degree of closeness. And
two separate houses really solves the roommate problem. You deal with your knives however you want to deal with your knives in your own house.
And it is a balance.
True.
It is a balance, right? Because like ultimately when you're saying, okay, we're gonna partner in some way, shape, or form, whether it's legally marry or whether you're just gonna start dating or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
There's no version of that where you're not sacrificing something, where you're not compromising something, right? And so I think
that's real.
Right. And so I think that's the thing, is to realize, like, am I a person who even wants to do that? Right. And so even when you're talking about like the two separate houses, like that may work for some people, but for a lot of people, it's like, well, no, that's not a reality for me. And I need you to compromise X, Y, and Z because this is the most important thing to me. And I think, again, that goes back to like self-awareness and self-work and realizing what your core values are. Right. And then communicating with somebody and saying, do we share those core values? Because I think when people don't, like, that's where you see the issues. It's like, well, this really matters to me, but it doesn't matter to you. It's not a shocker when you start to argue about those things.
It isn't. And sometimes people are so surprised at their differences. And I kind of think like, you're literally two separate humans with like completely separate life histories, like leading up to meeting each other, different family, probably different city you were brought up in. Like maybe there's some cultural differences. Maybe there's an age, like there's so many, like, of course there's going to be differences. It's about like, how do you want to navigate them?
Yeah, I think
so. All right. Well,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I also think I think for me, if there's one takeaway from the every 7 thing that's not about me changing government policy or anything, it is kind of that sense of just put yourself in a room where the goal is talking, is addressing the elephant. Just give yourself the space to just sometimes, with or without the help of a mediator, just to look at it, to put it under the microscope and examine it and just see if there's, you might find that it's past saving, or you might find that it just is a degree off, and that a slight shift is suddenly, answers all the problems and changes everything, I think that's
true.
Yeah.
That's a good bow.
Thank you.
Summation of that, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's just such an important topic to explore that I don't think gets questioned enough. And so I really loved every 7. I hope that people listening will also check it out and have their minds expanded a bit. So if people want to connect with you guys, if they want to check out the film, where can they connect with you?
So you can check out the film right now on YouTube, specifically via the Crafty channel. If they want to connect with us, you can check out either of our websites. I think I'm www.alexhanno.com, very creative.
And I'm www.thecaitlinmorris.com, because CaitlinMorris.com was taken.
Classic. And then you can always...
My name is also taken now. It's terrible.
Rude.
It's terrible. I used to have it too, and I let it go. It's terrible.
Big mistake. Some big companies swept in and they took it. And then obviously you can look us up on Instagram as well. I think I'm at Alexander Hanno, and Caitlin is at her name backwards, SIRROMCC.
Oh, tough one.
Which took me years.
We will just link to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll link so people don't have to try and spell Morris and Caitlin.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for listening. We will catch you all next Monday for another new episode of Ask a Sex Therapist. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Ask a Sex Therapist podcast. Got a question about spicing things up in the bedroom? Find the answers you're looking for in my Dirty Talk Guide, a free resource for my podcast listeners. Grab yours now at heathershannon.co/dirty talk. Again, that's heathershannon.co/dirty talk. And be sure to tell your partner or friends, because everyone has something they would like to ask a sex therapist.